I can see the stars align.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's Jaime Zapperzan, the host of Humble Drive, where we talk about all sorts of inspirational founders, co-founders, entrepreneur, and everyday people who have accomplished incredible things. So today's an interesting case, largely because I'm going to be learning about it with you as I go through this podcast episode today. It's a case that I've been wanting to read up on for quite some time, and I just haven't had the chance to. And I've heard of this man for a long time, and even more so in recent months or recent years. You may know who I'm talking about. His name is Paul Watson. If you don't know who he is, well, stay with me because I'm going to tell you about him, and we're going to learn about him together. Now, Paul Watson has been in the headlines more recently due to his animal advocacy efforts, particularly in the ocean and with whales. So, in general, there's a whaling controversy, and he's currently being detained in a jail in Greenland. Now, I'm going to learn more about this and share it with you. For those who know me well in my personal life, I'm a huge animal advocate. For as long as I can remember, I've empathized a lot with animals and those who can't advocate for themselves. I love all kinds of animals. It's why I'm vegan. It's really, when I retire one day, I do want to open an animal sanctuary. I just love all the animals in the ocean, out of the ocean, love all of them. So in a nutshell, while I can't sit here right now and say I can advocate and stand for everything that Paul Watson has done, I have no idea because we're about to find out together. But in general, it sounds like the guy's heart's in the right place. Let's find out. I could be wrong because I know there's controversy, not just because he loves whales, because I think that he actually has some controversial tactics in terms of what he does to protest certain activities like whaling. Whaling's bad. I can just go ahead and say that right off the bat because, well, who's going to support slaughter of whales, of beautiful mammals that are largely in numbers are in decline? So let's get into it, and let's learn more about Paul Watson together. Welcome to Humble Drive, episode 3. All right, so let's dive into a story that is equal parts fascinating, controversial, and important for the future of our oceans. Today we're talking about Paul Watson, and he's one of the most polarizing figures right now in environmental action and activism. And if you don't already know him, you've probably heard whispers about a man who's taken on entire governments and industry to protect whales and marine life. But here's the kicker. Right now, he's detained in Nuuk, Greenland. I had to Google that. I wasn't sure how to actually pronounce Nuuk at first. The UK Nuuk. It's Nuuk. By the way, that's pronounced Nuuk, not Nuuk. Nuuk. Double O. Okay. Like the reading device, Nook. Is that how it's pronounced? I don't have one. Or like Nook, like a cozy little corner that you sit in and you cozy up in a nook and read about. No. Okay. Anyways, I diverged. So let's rewind and start from the beginning and learn where Paul Watson came from. So Paul Watson's early life. Paul Watson was born on December 2nd, 1950 in Toronto, Canada. Fellow Canadian, just like me, and maybe you, but maybe not you, but definitely me. From a young age, he felt a deep connection to the natural world, particularly the ocean. His family eventually moved to New Brunswick, also in Canada, and living near the water only strengthened his bond with marine life. Now, here's a story that's going to tell you everything that you need to know about Paul Watson's early life. As a teenager, he once disrupted a group of hunters by scaring away beavers that they were trying to trap. That bold, confrontational spirit became the cornerstone of his life's work. He realized that he could do something, make some noise, stir things up, and save some animals, save some lives, which is pretty commendable if you ask me. Maybe not for the trappers, but boo to them. Fast forward to the early 1970s now. Paul Watson was one of the founding members of Greenpeace, which I'm sure you've heard of. It's a group of activists that are opposing nuclear testing. But pretty soon their focus expanded to include issues like whaling and the broader destruction of marine ecosystems. In 1975, Paul Watson experienced a life-changing moment while aboard a Greenpeace mission. He physically positioned himself between a harpoon and a whale, risking his own life to save the animal. I can't even imagine a moment like that where you're literally jumping between a harpoon and an animal, but such a beautiful, majestic animal. So maybe I can imagine doing it in that moment. I'd hope I would be as brave as that. Maybe not. Anyway, later he said he looked into the whale's eye and he saw a sentiment being fighting for survival in that moment. He saw that commonality in the whale's eyes, fear, and that want to survive. That moment solidified his mission, but it also marked the beginning of tensions within Greenpeace. In 1977, Watson broke away from Greenpeace, frustrated by what he saw as their increasingly bureaucratic and ineffective approach. He founded the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, an organization with one very clear goal: to take direct action to protect marine life. And when I say direct action, I mean it. Direct action. Watson was ready to ram whaling ships, throw stink bombs on decks, and even disable vessels engaged in illegal activities. So he is really going out on a limb and doing anything and everything that he can to make a difference and to stop those that were really targeting animals in the ocean, in particular whales. Now, this is where the story starts to get a little controversial. While Watson and his supporters see these actions as necessary to enforce international conservation laws, others, including governments and the whaling industry, have labeled him a pirate, a terrorist, and more recently, a criminal, which is why we're talking about him today. So that's where we have really two sides of the spectrum. Is Paul Watson a hero, or is he an outlaw? What's controversial about Paul Watson? Well, for starters, his tactics aren't exactly peaceful protests, not always. They're disruptive, they're confrontational, they're controversial, and they're often causing property damage. So, for example, he's rammed whaling ships to stop them from hunting. Sea Shepherd crews have boarded vessels without permissions. I guess that's where he's getting the label of pirate, because he's onboarding other vessels without permission. Sounds like a pirate to me. And they've even thrown, I'm going to say this wrong, it's a sort of acid, butyric acid. So essentially it's rancid butter gone bad, onto ships to ruin whale meat. So this is already whales that have been killed. They're now bringing the whale meat back to port. And he's essentially saying, screw you. I'm going to throw butter on here and make this unsaleable. Not sure the strategy behind that. Wouldn't they go and kill more whales? Not sure how I feel about that one. Maybe there's more to it. Anyway, Watson argues that these actions are non-violent because they never harm people, only property. But countries like Japan, Norway, and Iceland, where whaling is still practiced and is an active industry, they don't see it that way. They've accused him of piracy, eco-terrorism, and obstruction of business. Now, let's talk about how Paul Watson became detained today and now. In July 2024, he was arrested in Nuuk, Greenland, on an international warrant issued by Japan. This is where I started seeing Paul Watson on my feed. It was when he was detained in Japan. This warrant stems from an accident going back to 2010. That's 14, almost 15 years ago, where Watson allegedly interfered with a Japanese whaling vessel in the Antarctic Ocean. Japan has charged him with assault, property damage, trespassing on ships, and obstruction of business. Watson is currently being held in Greenland, and Danish authorities decide whether to extradite him to Japan. His detention has been extended multiple times, and as of now, he's expected to remain in custody, until at least the end of this month, or December 18th, 2024. Just over a week from now, because today is December 10th. So one of the most puzzling parts about Paul Watson's case is the timeline. The incident he's being prosecuted for happened in 2010, yet his arrest didn't happen until 2024. Riddle me that, right? 14 years later. What is with the decade-long delay? It turns out Watson has been navigating international waters, literally and figuratively, for years. After the 2010 incident, Japan issued an Interpol red notice for his arrest. But Watson managed to evade capture by avoiding countries that might extradite him. He even fled Germany in 2012 after being detained on a separate warrant, fearing that extradition to Costa Rica or Japan would be inevitable. For years, Watson lived in France, a country that refused to extradite him. Bravo, France. Good. Thanks in part to strong support from the local authorities and the French government. That's why Macron supports him and wants his release. But when he traveled to Nuuk, Greenland, earlier this year, local authorities acted on Japan's warrant. Greenland, I do not like you and I will not visit you. Nay. Anyways, they acted on Japan's outstanding arrest warrant, but why now, right? 14 years is a long time. It seems Japan's persistent and Greenland's compliance with international extradition laws finally caught up with him, simply put. To understand why Paul Watson's fight matters, we need to talk about whaling in general. Now, whales play a vital role in marine ecosystems, as I'm sure most people are aware of, or at least have that hunch, right? They're essential to marine life. They balance food chains. They support the health of phytoplankton. which produces oxygen as well as absorbs carbon dioxide. But here's the grim reality. Commercial whaling has driven several species to the brink of extinction. Blue whales, once numbering in the hundreds of thousands, are now critically endangered, with fewer than 25,000 left. Fewer than 25,000 blue fin whales. Fin whales, another frequent target of whaling, are classified as vulnerable today, with their population declining due to illegal and commercial hunting. Disgusting. While whaling is banned by the International Whaling Commission, or the IWC, countries like Japan, Norway, and Iceland exploit loopholes to continue hunting under the guise of scientific research or cultural tradition. Japan alone has killed thousands of whales since leaving the IWC in 19. Activists like Watson argue that these practices are not only unnecessary, but also catastrophic for marine ecosystems. Now, let's talk about the million-dollar question. Will Paul Watson be released? His supporters are cautiously optimistic, but the situation is complicated. On one hand, Watson has significant international backing and celebrity backing and press backing. French President Emmanuel Macron has openly called for his release, and protests in cities around the world, especially in France, have kept the pressure on. Even celebrities like Martin Sheen, James Cameron, as I mentioned before, have joined the cause. On the other hand, Japan is determined to see him extradited, accusing him of the piracy, obstruction, and property damage. If Greenland's courts decide to comply, Watson could face harsh penalties in Japan, including a potential prison sentence. The Danish Ministry of Justice is expected to make its decision by December 18, 2024. In the meantime, Watson's legal team and his supporters are working tirelessly to ensure he remains in Greenland or is allowed to return to France, which would be the best case scenario for him. Activists argue that extraditing him would be a dangerous precedent, discouraging environmental defenders from taking bold action to protect the planet. That is a controversial statement. It's like, where is the line, though, right? There's a precedent either way you go with this one. On one hand, while I support Paul Watson without knowing the cumulative measures he's taken over all these years, the last 40 plus years, in his environmental actionism, I also have seen some activities and bold moves done by environmentalists that I think cross boundaries as well. So while it's really a subjective thing, setting a precedent one way or the other is dangerous, right? So I do see why this is a controversial case. It's not really cut and dry, is it? Paul Watson's detention has sparked an international outcry. Environmentalists and public figures alike, like French President Emmanuel Macron, actors Martin Sheen and James Cameron, and thousands of activists have called for his release. They argue that Watson is being punished for enforcing, conservation laws that governments have failed to uphold. But not everyone supports Watson. Of course not, or else it wouldn't be controversial, right? Critics say his actions undermine diplomatic efforts and paint the conservation movement as radical and dangerous. So I don't know where I stand on this. Actually, no, I'm not even going to say that. I know exactly where I stand on this. I completely agree with the likes of James Cameron and environmental activists. I think that violence is never the answer, but from what I can actually see, what the research says is that he hasn't been violent. Could there be that could be dangerous by onboarding a ship, throwing butter on the deck, someone could slip and hurt themselves. From conflict, yes, I think that byproducts of those behaviors could result in violence or harm. But ultimately, I do believe from what I'm reading and what I'm learning right now is that he's doing this because there has been failure on governments to uphold essentially conservation efforts. I don't think there's any reason in today's day or ever, frankly, to be killing these beautiful mammals. That goes even further in terms of dolphins and what happens every year. I can't even think of what it's called right now, but I know that every year in certain parts of the world, I think Japan being one of them, I believe it is Japan, where they actually have almost like a celebration and go and kill dolphins as well. And that is disgusting if that's still ongoing. I don't even want to Google it because I don't want to see it right now. I'll probably cry. That should be stopped too. So yeah, it's the failure of others to withhold their duties. And he's doing something about it. So he's talking the talk and he's walking the walk. And no, he shouldn't be in jail for that. I think that this should be used as an opportunity to actually look at who isn't doing their job and who should be doing their job and come to some agreement between governments to uphold these conservation efforts or just general, what should I say, sanity? I can't think of the word. I'm going to have to superimpose it over my voice right now. I haven't got much sleep this week. But anyway, So how can you help? So if you're like me and you think the work that Paul Watson has done throughout his career and which has led to his incarceration today, here is how you can help, which I'll also link below. Number one is, of course, stay informed. Follow updates on Watson's case from reliable sources like Captain Paul Watson Foundation or major news outlets. Number two, raise awareness. Share his story on social media or join peaceful demonstrations. Contact authorities. You can write to a political representative, urging them to oppose his extradition, or donate. Donate to his legal defense fund through the Captain Paul Watson Foundation, which I'll link below. I'm also going to look up to see if I can find any petitions. I'm sure there is one, if not several, that probably opposes extradition. And so I'll look those up and I'll link those as well. But I think this leads to a larger conversation. I mean, why is he in this situation to begin with? I wish I had that information in front of me. I don't. Maybe I'll record a second appendix to this episode and find out exactly why he is still incarcerated and why they're seeking to extradite him and really what it's looking like. Are we thinking that it's optimistic and that he'll be released? Is it looking like we're not going to have the best case scenario? I will see if I can do a follow-up before I close out. But ultimately, here are my final thoughts. Love him or hate him, Paul Watson has spent his life fighting for what he believes in. Whether you think he's a hero or whether you think he's a pirate really depends on your perspective and where your morals and values lay. And I'm trying to say that in a gentle way because I think there's only one answer. Anyway, but one thing's for sure, the oceans wouldn't be the same without him. I truly believe that. And I think that people like him, controversial, they're doing what they believe in. And he believes he's doing the right thing. And I think many others believe he is as well. So if you want to learn more, please visit CaptainPaulWatsonFoundation.org or check out Sea Shepherd's work to protect marine life around the world. Thanks for tuning in today. This is the episode 3 of The Humble Drive. Follow us on YouTube as well as Spotify and anywhere else that you may get your podcast. Give me a 5-star and leave any questions or anyone else that you want me to cover in upcoming episodes. Thanks, guys. Take care.
I can see the stars align, dance around the moon every night. And now my eyes are open wide, and the sky has never looked so bright. Now I don't need to see